Is Pax Dei Early Access worth playing? I think the answer is probably not, but I'm going to explain why. But it is going to raise some big questions about the very nature of Early Access and Sandbox games. And there's a very simple question, which is this game basically just The Sims for middle-aged people? Maybe. Let's find out. So what is Pax Dei first and foremost? Very simply, it's a social sandbox MMO. Now, what does that actually mean? What it means is that when you start, it's all the hallmarks of a survival crafting game, except it doesn't actually have the survival element of it. Basically, you don't starve to death or anything like that. What you do need to do when you start is to collect stone, collect twigs, and start building up your camp. Now, you can place one plot if you bought the $40 version of this game, and I think it's 2 plots for maybe like $65, and then it's 4 plots for about $100. Forgive me if I'm a little bit off with those numbers, but it'll be near enough. Now, the plots are where you build, so you can whack that down anywhere and start crafting. And then you'll build like basic stations, furnaces, smelters, build your house, build whatever you like. The game doesn't have a traditional like character level, but there are skills that you will level up, like weaponsmith, blacksmith, etc. The game does have action combat, but the combat is relatively simplistic. And that's the game, right? There's not much else to talk about. That's the game. But before we start going into the negatives with this game, let's try and talk about some of the positives. And there's 2 main ones that I can think of. First and foremost, the game is actually truly magnificently beautiful. It looks stunning. Visually, it's incredible. Sometimes when the light is shining, maybe it's like early morning or the sun is setting, it can look absolutely sensational. I'm not 100% sure if I have footage of this, but there was one time I was in a cave and I looked back and saw the entrance of the cave and the sun was shining. Oh my god, it's beautiful. And I've just discovered that there's like this camera mode, so you can literally like fly up into the sky and take cinematic videos and pictures and stuff like that. It's insane. It's beautiful. Now, I know the instant counter argument to this is that it is Unreal Engine 5 and, you know, that's doing the heavy lifting. And you know what? That might be valid, but I don't really care how the sausage is made. I just care that the sausage is tasty. And if I'm honest, the next good thing that I think it does is to open up a lot of creativity. So the amount of different buildings and stuff like that people can build is also very impressive. I think there was like a 1-week competition that some content creators were doing, and the stuff that they built in that week, if I'm honest, was sensational. Little towns and villages and stuff like that. It really looked very good. However, that creativity might not be something you can do as a solo player because it will just take a long time. And that leads me to talk about the negatives. And the first major negative is that everything absolutely takes ages. And I don't just mean running around the map, although that takes a while. What I mean is that the crafting sequential progress takes a while. You have to build one thing to unlock another, to get this extra type of material, to unlock another. And it's very, very, very complicated, and it requires a lot of resources. It's that simple. Trying to actually explain the order in which you craft things is almost nigh on impossible, because what you probably want to do is play this in a group, and you want to probably dedicate yourself to being something, being a weaponsmith, being a blacksmith, being a chef, being what have you. I was looking at becoming a chef, and then I crafted the cooking tools or whatever the hell I needed. And then that unlocked the ability for me to craft 3 different cooking stations. And there's more than that the more you progress. It's not simple, it takes a while, it's quite complicated, and it's a little bit awkward. What's weird is it was actually a little bit easier in the Alpha 1 that I played, and then in Alpha 2, which I didn't play, they made it grindier, and they've kept that grindier element to it. I don't know why, but it's deeply confusing. And not only that, by the way, there is literally time gates. So for example, charcoal I think takes maybe like 25 minutes. And then if you want to craft iron, that takes a literal hour. So people have like a shed ton of furnaces and stuff like that. There's literally real time to crafting, and that slows you down just automatically. I don't think the game even needs that, because the amount of materials you need is truly like frightening. There's probably a couple of people in the world who will enjoy that kind of stuff. If that sounds great to you, like you like Valheim and stuff like that, but you want a really like hardcore version of it where everything is taking a long time, crack on. For most people, I don't think so, right? I'm not a believer. And actually, you don't want to be playing this game as a solo player. The devs themselves say this is not a solo game, this is a social MMO. And I believe it, right? You really need a pre-existing group to get this game going. You can join groups in-game, but the tools are a little bit limited. Really, the social element has to be done outside of the game. And the reason you need to have that social element is what you want to say, okay, you're going to be the blacksmith. We're going to feed you resources. You do that. You're going to be the carpenter. We're going to feed you resources. You do that. Now, I found myself not really being a crafter. I was more of a gatherer hunter kind of guy. I was going out killing mobs, which were beasts, not actual NPCs, because they were too hard for me. I was going mining, going chopping down trees and stuff like that, and basically exchanging my raw materials. Sometimes I would process them, but exchanging those for items like new tools and stuff like that. You need to play it as a group, basically the only way. And the next major downside to the game that I think most people will notice is the combat. To put it simply, the combat is bad. And the devs know this. Sometimes the devs are aware of these issues and they have sort of like a roadmap, although it's not really a roadmap because there's no time on it, but they say, hey, we are going to improve the combat feel. And that's good because right now you play it and the combat is very basic. It's effectively just left clicking. You get like a weapon ability by default, which, is quite good. You just press control and either left click or right click depending on what ability it is. But there's not really much to it. It's very, very bare bones and very basic. It might get interesting as you get more abilities, but I've played for like 15 hours and I didn't really get any abilities. So maybe it gets better in that regard. I don't think so. I don't know. So overall, if you're playing this as like an action combat MMO, then be aware, right? It's just not that good. Something that was sort of not bad but not great is the character creator. It was okay. You can't do anything revolutionary with it, but it's there, it exists, it's fine. Another thing that I don't really care about, but I know some people might, the launch ran into some issues. There was lag, NPCs were spawning out of nowhere, there was desync, some people couldn't place their plots. All fine. They're not fine, right? They're bad. But when an MMO launches, I personally expect issues. If you expect perfection, then you probably need to wait a couple of days. There's been issues, it's not been a great launch. The Steam reviews very quickly reflected that, by the way. And actually the performance of the game is not that amazing. I'm rocking a 4070 Super. It's been okay, but the performance probably not that good. And I think some of that's going to be what people are actually crafting. Like, you go and look around the map, people have a shed ton of like furnaces all going at the same time, partly because everything takes so long and it's literally time gated, etc. But for me, really the big problem with this game is that it's a sandbox, and I don't think it's a very good sandbox. Or at least not yet. Not that I'm confident that will change. So what do I mean by that? Like, obviously a sandbox, the idea about it is that the players create the content. But I would put it to you and people who enjoy sandboxes before that actually you need the game to sort of like hold your hand a little bit and to give you a little bit of direction. You need something that instigates the fight. Pax Dei at the minute is a beautiful looking world, but then there's not much else to it. Now, this is another section where actually the devs on their roadmap, that's not a roadmap, say, hey, we are going to have these systems like religion and these like other roles with soldier and priest and stuff like that. And they do have like a PvP area, but there's only a very small reason to go there, which is like an abundance of mats. But ultimately, right now, if you paid for the early access, then you're not getting any of those, right? That's not content that exists right now, apart from the PvP zone, obviously. Those systems aren't in the game, and I think it desperately needs those systems, because otherwise it's an empty sandbox. There's no story, there's no quests, there's no pre-built cities or anything like that. There's no actual systems to like create wars or anything like that. There's pretty much nothing. The first thing that I think they're going to bring is a marketplace, so you can actually have like player-run shops and that kind of stuff, which might create a little bit of instigation, right? Because then you actually want the resources because you can make profit. That sounds like something that should already be in the game, maybe. I think a lot of people's concern, which I think might be sort of right with this game at the moment, is that the sandbox label might literally just let them hand wave away some complaints, being like, go make your own fun. But we have a little crap cheap sand pit in the garden, which is on these cheap plastic legs. And if I say to my daughter, hey, let's go and play with it, and inside that sand pit there's just a little bit of sand, she'd probably play with it for 30 seconds before she'd ask me to go do something else. However, if I fill it up, I put a bucket and spade in there, I have some dinosaurs that we can play with, do you know what? We can be there 30 minutes, an hour. Pax Dei right now is the sandbox with little sand. It needs the toys to actually make it fun. And I think that's a huge problem. And will they fix it? Well, we'll talk more about the development timeline in a second, because all of this highlights an issue to me, which is how early should an early access game be? In the past, we've had games like V-Rising, Palworld, and much more. Games that have been like early access that have been, quite frankly, much better from the very start. Early access Pax Dei sort of feels like alpha and maybe like alpha 3. And a lot of people are saying, oh, well, you can't expect too much from an early access game. Again, hand waving away criticism, but in my eyes, you've charged for the product, right? It's 40 euros. If you really wanted people to test the game, maybe you put the early access as $20, 20 euros, and then when the game's actually got the content you want to make, you start increasing the price. I think games like Minecraft have done that. One thing that games shouldn't do on Steam Early Access, by the way, is to use Early Access as pure crowdfunding. That's in the Steam guidelines. They say if you can't make the game without needing these sales, then you shouldn't do Early Access. So they might want the funding, but in theory they should be able to complete the game without that funding. And what do I mean by how early is early access, by the way? I have no game dev knowledge, but if I put together a UE5 tech demo and I tried to sell that and I said, hey guys, I'm going to be making this an insane, great game, you should definitely play it, there'll be giant sausages everywhere, huge copium, please buy my $50 game. Quite rightly, people would be like, Jay, you're an idiot, you can't do that. The thing is, the question then is like, how much do you believe these devs? These devs are ex-Eve devs. They're obviously very competent, right? But you're basically buying hopes and dreams rather than the actual product. And granted, you should know that when you buy an early access game, I still think that this game wasn't ready though. I think it's too early, think it's too much, don't think it's ready. Simple as that, basically. One key question is going to be, how quickly will this game be developed? Now, whilst there definitely were changes from the Alpha 1 around about November till now, the number of changes hasn't really been significant. That immediately makes me wonder how long it will take for them to deliver on the content that they say is coming. Will it ever actually materialize? I think that's a fair question. Pax Dei will very likely never be my type of game, but even if I try and put that aside, I still think there's nothing really there at the minute. The world is fantastic, the crafting is sort of good with its creativity, but very slow to actually do. You definitely need a pre-existing group to play this, but even then, I think pre-existing groups don't have a reason to stick around. I think it'll be very quiet for a long period of time until they get those toys in the sandbox. Once that happens, maybe we'll revisit it. It's an empty sandbox and a quite expensive early access, and I think it's too early for early access. Combat's not great, the game's not that amazing. There will be some people who want to play a game like this, I just don't think Pax Dei is really the one, or at least not yet. Let me know your thoughts. Did you shell out for this game? Let me know in the comments below. Other than that, big shout out to my Patreons. You guys really support me. Really appreciate you guys. Come watch me play on Twitch. I'm not going to be doing any more Pax Dei. In the next couple of days, I'm actually going to be doing Tarisland, which probably you guys don't care about. But I'm also in the beta for Quinfall, I believe. So come and have a check. It's going to be super fun and sexy. Probably not sexy. Maybe fun. Maybe not even fun. It'll be a thing. I will be streaming. Have a most beautiful day. Like and subscribe. Goodbye.